My family dealt with my identity the way America deals with race. The white side just basically didn't deal with it because they didn't have to, and if they did have to, they just kind of shrugged it off. And then the black side was basically training me to be a black man.
On Christmas morning, I was like 3 years old, opening up my presents, and out pops a life-size black Raggedy Ann doll. I started hysterically crying, and my dad's behind the camera being like, Deidre, this is not good. She's afraid of black people. Deidre, this is just terrible. What are we gonna do? We've got to enroll her in the Dance Theater of Harlem. My mom looks up at the camera and she's just like, James, the doll is the size of her. And that is sort of the way that race was dealt with in my family. Like, my dad was like hyper aware of it, and my mom was like, I'm just black.
The way we talk about race is so defined by where you live, the people you surround yourself with, and of course by your upbringing and your household and your family dynamic.
Before I turned 6, I lived with my mother in Southeast Michigan. But then after that, I lived with my father and my black stepmother in Huntsville, Alabama, in a very black household with very black customs and traditions. My mother's side of the family, my white side of the family, they love me. My grandmother, I'm a golden child. You know, I never had a conversation with anybody about the fact that I'm black.
I grew up in Baltimore, and in Baltimore, you were black or you were white. Like, there wasn't really like an area in between. My dad had 4 children previously, so my mom was the minority in that situation. My mom's family lived in Missouri, rural white America. I'm still the only black person there whenever I go visit. They really like to say that they don't see color, and I think that that is their way of reinforcing their love with me, and sometimes that makes me feel more distant from them, but it's always been a true love.
My experience in my world as a kid was being in a white family, in a white school, in a white town. There was nothing to engage with in terms of race. My parents didn't think about it. They didn't have black friends. When I started to develop a sense of consciousness and said to my mom, you know, what were you all thinking? Like, why would you adopt a black child and raise her in an all-white environment? It just doesn't make sense. And she would say, well, you know, Martin Luther King.
I do feel really thankful that my dad made this like really intense effort to put me inside black communities, even though we lived in a predominantly white neighborhood.
It was always clear that we were different from the other kids. When we were around our black side, we were just like them. When we were around our white side, we were not like them. We were the half-black kids. I had the best grandparents, but they also were prejudiced. And so I could never be my whole self around them, which means you can never have the complete relationship. And if my grandfather would make a remark or something, I would have to decide, am I gonna call him out on this or am I gonna keep the peace? And like always having to make those negotiations.
My grandmother disowned my father when he married my mother. On my mom's side was very welcoming. I mean, I think there's something in the black community often that is more open. We understand the history and that, you know, we've been mixing a long time.
The way someone once put it to me was black is the inclusive definition and white is the exclusive definition, which is that, you know, you were welcomed with open arms by your black family and by the black people in your community. And so that's just how you came to understand yourself.
I never had the, you know, you're not black enough, you're not white enough. I never had those issues. And I think probably part of that is because I was raised in a household with a very strong black identity. And my father put books in my hand. And my father's a pretty quiet man, but we did have our conversations and they were substantial.
I come from a family of social justice activists and college professors. My mother was a reproductive justice advocate and, you know, used to like give us mirrors to look at our vaginas. Like my people talk about everything. So we certainly talked about race.
I feel very fortunate that my mom is black. She transmitted to me about what it meant to be a Black woman in the world, how I was going to be perceived, and that I had a tradition to fall back on.
My mom is someone who believes strongly in social justice, and she would be the one who would take us out on marches. She would be the one who made sure that we participated in Black History Month events. As great as my mom was, she didn't talk to us a lot or really at all about our own racial identity. I think she left that to our dad. If I were to talk to her about it now, she would say that she didn't understand that she needed to.
My father had this real concern that we would understand that we were Black. My grandmother, my mom's mother, she sent us dolls, and she sent one Black one and one white one. And it was the biggest fight. My father was like, I'm not having kids play with a white baby. And my mom was like, what are you gonna do, throw me in the trash? And so it was just stuff like that where you're like, this is deep, shit is, this shit is real.
My mother, like most white people in my experience, avoided racial discussions. I never really spent a lot of time thinking about it until I started to get a little bit older and we go visit my mother and my little sister, who was also mixed. I started to become more aware and concerned about the fact that we were the only Black people in this town. And I started to pay attention to the fact that I was a Black boy with a white mother and wondering how people viewed that. Maybe nobody cared, but I guess that's part of the struggle of being Black in America, right? You start paying attention to things like, what's a Black man without his paranoia, right?
Even if you present as Black to most of the world, if your family is mixed race, then you have a unique perspective on the world.
I am a Black woman. I see myself as a Black woman, but I also have to be honest. I love my mother. I can't say for many of my Black friends that they deeply, intimately, without any bounds, love a white person.
I love all kinds of people. Like my Uncle Fred, my mom's big brother, is, in the Tea Party. And I love my Uncle Fred. I don't want to talk politics with Uncle Fred.
My mother's a Trump supporter. She came in town to visit, and it was the worst visit I've ever had in my entire life with a family member. We ended up getting into these arguments about Trump. I mean, voices were raised. We didn't speak for a couple hours after that. And then I apologized. That night, I apologized to my mother because of my tone. The very next day, this woman, my mother, the woman who birthed me, put on a Make America Great Again t-shirt. Like, how do you, as my mother with Black kids, like, you are a woman with children who are negatively impacted by the hate that this man is dredging up, right?
There's not a guidebook. You expect to be able to reach out to your mom, and I imagine she expects to be able to understand us or get it, but she stands up to defend whiteness. And then you're her child, and you're like, fuck whiteness. You're supposed to be defending me, but you don't get it because you don't experience it, so you don't know how. And God bless her, she's just trying.
I think we're going through, particularly in this era, this political climate, a period of trying to figure out what race means, what it means to us on a deeply personal level, and how we can be in families and relationships.
Just because you marry a Black person doesn't mean that you understand race any better than anyone else. And I think that's probably one of the biggest myths around white women who have children with Black men, is that somehow means that they are better at this. And they're not. They're just someone who fell in love with a man who happens to be Black.
Because mothers are often the ones who pass down a lot of the culture, I really feel sometimes for my biracial brothers and sisters who didn't have the Blackness coming down in that way.
If my own mother doesn't acknowledge that her Black kids are going through Black life, how is the rest of the world that doesn't even care about me, whose blood isn't coursing through my veins, gonna view or see me? So how to raise Black children in such a way that they can be empowered by who they are and be prideful of who they are and still be okay with having a huge white family and not feeling some type of way about that.